My daughter Sophie met Sandra at the school where she studied. They were exactly the same and spent a lot of time together. The two were convinced that they were twin sisters. And when I met Sandra and her mother, I was shocked and decided to find out what had really happened. Everything changed when I moved from Texas to Los Angeles. It was a new city, a new life. The decision to leave was a difficult one, but I needed to move on for Sophie, my daughter. The grief for the loss of Irene was still heavy, but I knew I needed to be strong. On Sophie's first day of school, my heart was torn between the fear that she wouldn't fit in and the hope that she would find new friends. As I parked the car in front of the school, I watched her face, pale with nervousness. "It's okay, Sophie. You will do well. You just need to be kind. And if someone is rude, just walk away. No fights, okay?" I tried to comfort her. She nodded, but the fear in her eyes was evident. When I saw her enter the school, a twinge of anxiety crossed me. I knew she had lost a lot lately. Losing your mother so young and now having to deal with such a big change. Hours later, when I went to pick her up, Sophie ran out, her face lit up by a smile she hadn't seen in a long time. She talked endlessly about a girl named Sandra, describing her as her lost twin. "Dad, you won't believe it. She is just like me. Even the teacher was surprised," she said, her enthusiasm jumping out at every word. Curious, I decided to meet Sandra and her mother. I made an appointment at McDonald's. When Sandra and her mother, Wendy, arrived, my world stopped. Sophie hadn't exaggerated. Sandra was the exact copy of my daughter. Wendy looked as surprised as I did. "My God, they are identical," he exclaimed, smiling nervously. The girls ran to the playground, leaving us alone. "Henry, nice to meet you," I said, trying to keep my composure. "It's a pleasure, Henry. You have a wonderful daughter," she replied, but there was something in her eyes, a hesitation that I didn't immediately understand. As we talked, Wendy mentioned something that baffled me. Sandra had been born in Texas and was adopted. The possibility that Irene had given birth to twins and had hidden it from me seemed absurd, but the resemblance between the girls left no doubt. The thought that Irene could have made this decision because she felt overwhelmed and alone devastated me. "Do you think it's possible?" I asked Wendy, disbelief plastered on my face. "I don't know, Henry, but we need to find out," she replied, her tone serious. At that moment, I realized that my life was about to take an unexpected turn. The past I had tried to bury came back with full force, demanding answers I didn't know if I was prepared to face. In the following days, the idea that Sandra could be my daughter did not leave me alone. It hammered in my head, keeping me up at night. I needed answers, so I decided to go back to Texas, where it all began. Before leaving, I talked to Wendy. "I'm going to the hospital where Irene gave birth. I need to find out the truth," he said, with determination in his voice. She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Henry, whatever the outcome, let's face this together." With Sophie safe at Wendy's house, I boarded the first flight to Dallas. The return to the city that housed so many painful memories was difficult. The pain of the past and the uncertainties of the present formed a whirlwind in my chest. At the hospital, I was greeted by an older nurse with a gentle face. "Can I help you?" she asked. I took a deep breath and explained my situation, each word coming out with difficulty. "My ex-wife, Irene, gave birth here 8 years ago. I need to know if there was another child." The nurse seemed to understand the seriousness of the request. "I'll see what I can find," he said before disappearing for long minutes. When he returned, he had a file in his hands. "Mr. Henry, your ex-wife has given birth to twin girls." My world came crashing down. Irene had actually hidden the truth from me. The nurse looked at me with compassion. She may have done what she thought was right, given the circumstances. Trembling, I thanked him and left the hospital, feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and guilt. Irene was no longer here to explain her decision, but the reality was that I had another daughter, and she had been raised by another woman. Now, I had to go back to Los Angeles and face a new truth. Sophie and Sandra were sisters, and I had to be a father to both of them, even if the past had robbed me of that chance. The flight back to Los Angeles was one of the longest of my life. Every minute on the air felt like a cruel reminder of the time I wasted, the years I wasn't there for Sandra. Guilt weighed like an anchor in my chest. When I arrived, Wendy was waiting for me at home, her face a mixture of concern and empathy. And then she asked, though the answer was clear in my eyes, "Sandra is my daughter, Wendy. She and Sophie are twins." I replied, my voice breaking. I felt the weight of truth finally fall on us. Wendy sighed deeply, running her hand through her hair. I imagined it, but to hear that, it makes everything more real. I sat on the couch, emotionally exhausted. I don't know how to say this to them, Wendy. Will Sophie understand? And Sandra? How are we going to explain that she was adopted without her feeling abandoned? She sat next to me, putting her hand on my shoulder. The truth is, there's no perfect way to tell it, Henry. We will need to be sincere and careful. They are strong children, and they have each other. We spent hours planning how we would approach the subject. We decided that we would tell everything together in a way that the girls understood that, despite the circumstances, they were loved by both of them. The next day, we called Sophie and Sandra into the living room. The two entered laughing, still shrouded in the innocence of childhood. "Sophie, Sandra, we have something important to tell you." I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Wendy held my hand, and together, we began to weave the story of how fate brought us together. When we finally said they were sisters, silence filled the room for a moment. Then, as if a light had been turned on, the girls looked at each other and, without hesitation, hugged each other. "We always knew we were special," Sandra said, with a smile on her face. "Now we know why." Sophie, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "I've always wanted to have a sister." And in that moment, I realized that, despite everything, the future still held hope and happiness for all of us. The following weeks were a mixture of relief and challenge. Sophie and Sandra quickly adapted to the idea of being sisters. It was as if they had always known, as if that invisible bond between them had finally been revealed. But for me, the transition was harder. The guilt still hung over, along with the constant worry of how to balance the role of father for both. One night while the girls were sleeping, Wendy and I sat on the porch. "Henry, you've been very quiet lately. I know this was all a shock, but we need to be okay with them," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I know, Wendy. Alone. I feel so guilty. It wasn't there for Sandra. Irene made this decision herself. And now I'm trying to make up for 8 years of absence." She touched my hand, the simple gesture charged with understanding. "But you're here now. That's what matters. Girls are happy, and that's because you decided to fight for that truth." I looked at Wendy, grateful for her strength. "And you? How do you feel about all this? I can't imagine how hard it is for you." She smiled, though her eyes revealed a hidden tiredness. "Sandra has always been my daughter, Henry, but knowing that you're her biological father, well, it changes things, yes, but not in the way you think. I want Sandra to have the best of both worlds, the love of two families. I just don't want her to feel like we're trying to replace you," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "Don't worry, Henry. She knows I'm her mother, just as she knows you're her father. Love does not diminish. It grows." When he was right, love was not a zero-sum game. It was something that multiplied, something that the girls showed us every day with their shared smiles and laughter. That night, as I stargazed, I decided that I would dedicate myself completely to being the father that Sandra and Sophie needed. I couldn't change the past, but I could certainly shape a future full of love and presence. And in this new beginning, I promised myself that I would be by their side every step of the way, creating memories that would make up for the lost years. As the days passed, the routine began to adjust to the new normal. Sophie and Sandra became inseparable, as if they were trying to make up for lost time. Each day, I watched them, trying to capture every detail, every laugh, every little gesture that brought them together. One afternoon, I decided to take them to the park for a picnic. As they ran and played, I noticed how the two completed each other, each bringing to the other a lightness and joy that only true sisters share. Sitting on the grass, watching them. Wendy came over and sat down next to me. "They're so happy," he said, his eyes fixed on the girls. "It's like everything has fallen into place. Finally." I nodded, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. "You know, Wendy, I never thought I'd find something this good after everything that's happened. Sometimes I still find myself thinking about Irene, wondering what she would have said if I saw the girls together." When he sighed, thoughtful. Maybe she made the decision she thought was best at the time. Perhaps she knew that somehow you would meet. I looked at Wendy, seeing in her a strength that inspired me. "I'm grateful for everything, Wendy. Not only for Sandra, but for you. By accepting all this and still being so incredible." She laughed softly, leaning against my shoulder. "It wasn't easy at first, but seeing girls like this makes it all worth it. We've both been thrown into that situation, Henry, but I think we're doing a good job." As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, the girls came running towards us, panting, but with their faces lit up by smiles. "Dad, you and Winnie have to come play with us," Sophie exclaimed, holding my hand. Sandra, next to her, waved excitedly. "Come quickly, Dad." At that moment, as I ran with them, I felt the weight of the past dissipate, replaced by a lightness that I didn't even know was possible. I didn't have answers for everything, but I knew that with Wendy by my side and the girls guiding me, we were on the right track. We were building a family, a story of love and overcoming brick by brick. The days of peace and happiness began to be disturbed by a ghost I thought I had left behind. I received an unexpected letter, with no sender, but the Texas stamp made my heart race. I sat down at the kitchen table, the paper shaking in my hands as I opened it. The words jumped to my eyes like a punch in the stomach. "Henry, we need to talk about Irene. There are things you don't know." The rest of the letter was a request to meet at a low-key Dallas cafe. No signature, no clues as to who had sent it. My mind was spinning in 1,000 directions. Who could it be? What else did I not know? The mystery surrounding Irene's decision to give Sandra up for adoption was a wound that I thought was starting to heal. But now it seemed like someone wanted to rip that scar off again. When he noticed my disturbance when I got to the room, "Henry, what happened? You look pale." I showed him the letter, unable to hide what I was feeling. She read quickly, her eyes narrowing in concern. "Who do you think it can be? Are you going?" "I don't know, Wendy. I can't ignore that, but I also don't want to dig up things that could hurt more." She sighed, putting her hand on my shoulder. "If there's more to know, maybe you'd better find out now, Henry. But you don't have to do it alone. Let's go together." The next morning, with a knot in our stomach and Wendy's support, we took the first flight to Dallas. The memories of that city were like shadows that dragged behind me, heavy and uncomfortable. But there was a truth hidden there, and I needed to face it, no matter how painful it might be. When we entered the cafe indicated on the menu, the air was charged with tension. The place was almost empty, except for a solitary figure sitting in the corner, his face hidden by the brim of a hat. As we approached, she looked up, and the shock hit me like lightning. It was someone I would never expect to see again. "Henry, we need to talk," the figure said, in a voice full of secrets and pain. The past, which I had been desperately trying to bury, was back, more alive than ever. As I approached the table, the shock left me speechless. Standing before me was Thomas, Irene's younger brother. I hadn't seen him since her funeral, and the memory of that day hung in the air between us. "Thomas," I murmured, still trying to make sense of his presence there. "What are you doing here? And why did he call me?" He took off his hat, revealing tired eyes and an expression that mixed guilt and grief. "Henry, I should have looked for you a long time ago, but I didn't know how to tell you what I found out." "What did you discover?" I asked, feeling a chill down my spine. Thomas hesitated, looking at Wendy and then back at me. "It's about Irene and the decision to give Sandra up for adoption. It wasn't just because you were absent, Henry. It was something much darker." I sat down, my heart racing. "Speak up, Thomas." He took a deep breath, the words coming out slowly, as if each one carried an immense weight. Irene was pressured to hand over Sandra. She was involved with dangerous people, Henry. After the divorce, She got involved with a man who was not what she seemed. He manipulated her, took advantage of her vulnerability. When she found out she was pregnant with twins, he convinced her that she couldn't take care of 2 babies on her own. The ground seemed to open up under me. Are you saying she was forced to do this? Thomas nodded, his face gloomy. He convinced her that it would be better this way, that giving one of her daughters up for adoption would make her life easier. Irene was so broken that she believed him. I was speechless, a whirlwind of emotions invading me. Guilt, anger, sadness, everything was mixed. Why didn't you tell me that before? I asked, my voice full of frustration. Because I only found out the truth after she was gone. I tried to find this man, but he disappeared. Since then, I've struggled with the guilt of not having done more to protect you, Thomas said, his voice breaking. Wendy squeezed my hand, a silent gesture of support. And now, what do we do with this information? She asked, always practical, trying to stay focused on the future. Thomas looked at me, his eyes shining with tears. I don't know, Henry, but I thought you should know the truth. Maybe it will help you find peace, or maybe it will give you the strength to move forward. I just wanted to correct some of the harm that was done. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to break everything around me, but another part, more rational, knew it would be no use. The past was done, but the future was still in our hands. As we got up to leave, Thomas grabbed me by the arm. Henry, take good care of them. That's what Irene would have wanted. I nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility. When we left the cafe, the air of Dallas seemed heavier, but inside me, something was beginning to resolve. The past was finally revealed, and now, I needed to find a way to build the future. I looked at Wendy and, without having to say anything, she understood. Together, we would find a way to move forward. For us, for Sophie, and for Sandra. The return to Los Angeles was quiet. Thomas's words echoed in my mind, and the weight of the truth overwhelmed me. When he kept my hand between hers throughout the flight, but there was little to be said. What we had discovered changed everything, but it also, in a way, explained so much of what Irene had been through. When we got home, Sophie and Sandra greeted us with tight hugs and beaming smiles. They had no idea what an emotional hurricane we were facing. Dad, did you bring any surprises? Sophie asked with bright eyes. I forced a smile. The best surprise is to be back with you. During dinner, while the girls laughed and talked, Wendy and I exchanged complicit glances. We knew that we would soon have to tell them the truth. But how to reveal such a dark past to 2 children who had barely begun to understand the world? That night, after putting them to bed, we sat in the living room, the silence between us heavier than ever. Henry, we can't hide this forever, Wendy finally said, her voice soft but firm. I sighed, running my hands over my face. I know, Wendy, but how to explain something so horrible? How can you tell them that their mother was manipulated and forced to make an impossible decision? Wendy leaned forward, her eyes filled with a determination I'd always admired. We don't need to tell you all the details right now, but they deserve to know that Irene loved them, that what happened wasn't her fault, not even ours. I nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. Right, let's do it together. We will tell them, but with the care they deserve. The next day, we gathered Sophie and Sandra in the living room. They looked at us curiously, feeling the seriousness in the air. Girls, we need to talk about something very important. I began, trying to keep my voice steady. You know that Mama Irene has always loved you very much, don't you? The 2 nodded, confused. Wendy continued. There are things about the past that are difficult to understand, even for us adults. But what you need to know is that Mom did what she thought was best, even if it was a very difficult decision. Sophie frowned. Why? What happened? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of each word. She was pressured to make a very difficult decision. But deep down, she always wanted the best for you. Sandra looked at me, her eyes big and innocent. Does that mean she didn't want to give me away? When he held her hand. No, honey. She wanted both of you, more than anything. But sometimes life puts us in very complicated situations, where the choices we make are to protect those we love. The two girls looked at each other, assimilating the words with the surprising maturity that only children can have. And then, as if something invisible was breaking, Sandra threw herself into my arms, and Sophie did the same to Wendy. "We love you girls, and we're going to get through this together as a family," I said, hugging them tightly. At that moment, I felt that we were finally on the right track. The past had been revealed, and with it, the chance for a new beginning. It wouldn't be easy, but now, at least, we were facing everything with the truth on our side. And that, more than anything, gave us the strength to move forward. The days that followed our conversation with the girls were a mixture of relief and tension. Sophie and Sandra, despite the revelation, seemed even more united, as if the truth had strengthened the bond between them. Wendy and I, however, felt the weight of what was yet to come. On a quiet afternoon, while the girls were playing in the backyard, Wendy approached me, sitting next to me on the couch. "Henry, we need to talk about the next step." I knew this conversation would come, but I wasn't ready yet. "Do you think we need to do anything more?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She sighed, distractedly fidgeting with the cushion next to her. "The truth is that we cannot change the past, but we can shape their future. We need to think about what's best for girls now that they know the truth." "Are you thinking about formal adoption?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Wendy nodded. "Yes, Sandra is already my daughter legally, but if we're going to raise Sophie and Sandra as sisters, we need to make it official. They need stability, to know that nothing will separate them again." The idea made sense, but it also brought a sea of emotions. Officially adopting Sandra meant fully accepting the responsibility that Irene and I had shared, even if from a distance. "Does that mean you would adopt Sophie too?" Wendy looked into my eyes, her expression full of tenderness. "Yes, Henry. I already love Sophie as if she were mine. Doing so would only be a formality." A sense of gratitude and relief washed over me. "I want that too. I think it's the best way to make sure they grow up without fear, without doubts about the love we have for them." Before we could continue the conversation, Sophie and Sandra rushed into the room, laughing and full of life. "Daddy, Wendy, what are you talking about?" Sophie asked, curious. Wendy and I exchanged a complicit look before answering. "We're thinking of a surprise for you too," he said, smiling. The girls' eyes lit up with anticipation. "A surprise? What is it?" Sandra insisted, jumping with excitement. "Well, it's something very special," I explained, pulling the two of them closer. "We are thinking of making everything official. Wendy and I want to adopt you too, so that we can be a complete family, really." Sophie and Sandra looked at each other, understanding slowly forming on their faces. And then, in unison, they shouted, "Yes, we want that." The hugs that followed were tight and full of love. Wendy and I exchanged a look that said it all. We were ready to take this step together. The storm had passed, and the future, though uncertain, seemed brighter. That night, as I put the girls to sleep, I felt a peace that I had not experienced in a long time. Wendy joined me at the door of their room, watching as they both whispered and laughed among themselves, already lying down. "We're doing the right thing," I muttered, intertwining my fingers with hers. "Yes, Henry, we're finally building the family they've always deserved." The day of the adoption hearing came faster than we imagined. Wendy and I were nervous, but the girls, on the other hand, couldn't contain their excitement. They dressed in the most beautiful dresses they had, carefully choosing every detail as if they were for a big celebration. In court, we held the girls' hands as we waited our turn. The atmosphere was solemn, but there was a lightness in the air, as if everyone knew that this moment would change our lives forever. When the judge finally called us, Sophie and Sandra looked at each other, exchanging a complicit smile. We entered the courtroom, where the judge, a middle-aged man with gentle eyes, watched us with a welcoming expression. "So, today is an important day for this family," he began, looking at the girls. "Do you understand what this adoption means?" Sandra was the first to speak, her voice firm and full of conviction. "Yes, sir. It means that Sophie and I will be real sisters, and Wendy is going to be our mother." Sophie, holding Wendy's hand tightly, added, And Daddy's going to be Sandra's father too, officially. The judge smiled, moved. It seems that you all already know exactly what you want. And from what I see here, you are already a family. All that's missing is the signed paper. After a brief speech about the duties and responsibilities of a family, he took the pen and, with a firm gesture, signed the documents that formalized our union. Congratulations! You are officially a family. The girls jumped for joy, hugging us tightly. Wendy had tears in her eyes, and I felt an indescribable emotion wash over me. It was as if all the weight of the past few months had disappeared, leaving only pure happiness. As we left the courtroom, the sun shone brightly in the blue sky, as if even the universe was celebrating with us. We walked together, the girls holding hands, talking endlessly about the new lives they would have. At that moment, I knew we had made it. We built something strong, indestructible, a home where love would prevail no matter what the future brings. And as I looked at Wendy and the girls, laughing and hugging, I felt the ultimate peace of someone who had finally found her place in the world. I guess we can say this is our new story, our new beginning, I whispered to Wendy, who smiled and nodded. Yes, Henry, and it's just the beginning of the best part of our lives. Let us know what you think of this story and share it with your friends. It might brighten their day and inspire them. See you in the next exciting story.